The Battle of Gettysburg, fought from July 1st to July 3rd, 1863, in and around the town of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, stands as one of the most significant and defining engagements of the American Civil War. The three-day conflict not only marked a turning point in the war, but also became a symbol of the Union's resolve and determination to preserve the nation. The battle resulted in a decisive Union victory, with the Confederate Army of Northern Virginia, commanded by General Robert E. Lee, suffering a crushing defeat. This event, along with President Abraham Lincoln's subsequent Gettysburg Address, has become emblematic of the struggle for freedom and equality that shaped the future of the United States. The Battle of Gettysburg was preceded by a series of events that set the stage for this monumental clash. After a string of successes in the Eastern theatre of the war, General Robert E. Lee sought to capitalize on his momentum by launching a second invasion of the North. Lee's first attempt, the 1862 Maryland Campaign, had ended in the inconclusive Battle of Antietam, but he was undeterred. His decision to invade the North again was motivated by several factors, including the hope of relieving pressure on war-torn Virginia, gaining much-needed supplies, and potentially encouraging foreign recognition and support for the Confederacy. The Confederate Army, numbering approximately 75,000 men, marched northward in the summer of 1863, crossing the Potomac River into Pennsylvania. Lee hoped that a victory on northern soil would demoralize the Union and perhaps sway public opinion in the North to push for peace negotiations. On the other hand, the Union Army of the Potomac, led by General George G. Meade, was positioned to defend against any Confederate advance. As Lee's army moved through Pennsylvania, Union forces under the command of General Joseph Hooker pursued them, but Hooker's command was weak, and he was replaced by Meade just days before the battle. Meade had been appointed only a few days before the engagement, and his leadership was still untested. Despite the challenges, Meade's army, which numbered around 93,921 men, was determined to hold the line and protect the Union from a Confederate invasion. The Battle of Gettysburg began on the morning of July 1st, 1863, when Confederate forces encountered Union cavalry outside of Gettysburg. The initial fighting was light, but it escalated as more troops were drawn into the conflict. General Lee initially ordered a series of attacks on Union positions near the town of Gettysburg, believing that he could quickly push the Union forces back. However, Union forces put up a determined defense, and the fighting intensified throughout the day. The Confederates succeeded in pushing Union forces through the streets of Gettysburg, but the Union soldiers did not retreat far. By the evening of July 1st, Union forces had established defensive positions on the high ground to the south of town, notably around Cemetery Hill and Culp's Hill. These elevated positions would play a critical role in the battle's outcome. As night fell, both sides regrouped and prepared for the following day's fighting. Lee, confident in his army's strength and his ability to exploit the Union retreat, ordered an aggressive plan of attack for July 2nd. However, Meade's army was well positioned and ready for a fierce defense. On July 2nd, the Confederate Army launched a series of attacks on the Union's left flank. Lee hoped to exploit what he believed was a weakness in the Union line, but the Union soldiers, under the leadership of commanders like Major General Daniel Sickles, held their ground. One of the most significant engagements of the battle occurred on the southern end of the battlefield, near the Devil's Den, Little Round Top, and the Wheatfield. The Confederates launched repeated assaults on these positions, hoping to break through the Union line and capture the high ground. However, despite fierce fighting, Union forces held these critical positions. At Little Round Top, one of the battle's most iconic moments occurred. The Union forces, led by Colonel Joshua Chamberlain of the 20th Maine, were ordered to hold the southernmost point of the Union line at all costs. After a series of desperate counterattacks, Chamberlain's regiment was almost out of ammunition, and the Union forces seemed poised to be overrun. In a bold move, Chamberlain ordered a bayonet charge, driving the Confederates back and securing the position. His actions at Little Round Top became one of the most celebrated moments of the battle and a symbol of Union resolve. While the fighting at Little Round Top was intense, the Confederate attacks on the Union center and right flank were also fierce. However, the Union line held, and by the evening of July 2nd, both sides had suffered heavy casualties. Lee, realizing that his attacks had not broken the Union line, decided to shift his focus to the center of the Union position for the final day of fighting. The third and final day of the Battle of Gettysburg, July 3, 1863, witnessed one of the most famous and tragic assaults of the entire war, Pickett's charge. General Lee, convinced that a decisive victory was still within reach, ordered an all-out attack on the Union center on Cemetery Ridge. This attack would come to be known as Pickett's Charge, named after Major General George Pickett, whose division played a prominent role in the assault. Pickett's Charge was a massive coordinated infantry assault involving around 12,500 Confederate soldiers who were to march across open fields toward the Union lines. The Union artillery, positioned along Cemetery Ridge, unleashed devastating fire upon the advancing Confederate troops. The Union infantry, in turn, poured a deadly barrage of rifle fire into the advancing Confederates. Despite the courage and determination displayed by the Confederate soldiers, the charge was a catastrophic failure. The Confederate soldiers were mowed down by heavy artillery and rifle fire, and by the time they reached the Union lines, they were exhausted and shattered. Only a few Confederate soldiers were able to breach the Union defenses, but they were quickly repelled. The failure of Pickett's charge marked the high point of the Confederate assault and the beginning of their retreat from Gettysburg. By the afternoon of July 3rd, it was clear that the Union had won a decisive victory. The Confederate forces, unable to break the Union lines, began their retreat back to the south. Lee, unable to salvage the situation, ordered a retreat across the Potomac River, effectively ending the battle. The Battle of Gettysburg was an overwhelming victory for the Union, but it came at a high cost. The Union Army suffered approximately 23,000 casualties, while the Confederate Army lost around 28,000 men, including soldiers killed, wounded, captured or missing. The staggering loss of life underscored the brutality of the conflict and the tremendous sacrifice both sides made during the war. In addition to the heavy human cost, the battle had significant strategic implications. The Confederate defeat at Gettysburg ended Lee's second invasion of the North and shattered his army's momentum. The Confederacy was never again able to mount a large-scale offensive into Union territory, and Lee's forces were forced to retreat back to the south, where they would remain largely on the defensive for the rest of the war. Gettysburg's impact also had a profound psychological effect on both the Union and the Confederacy. For the Union, the victory brought renewed hope and determination. President Abraham Lincoln recognized the significance of the battle and sought to ensure that it would be remembered not just as a military victory, but as a symbol of the Union's commitment to the cause of freedom. On November 19, 1863, President Lincoln delivered the Gettysburg Address at the dedication of the Soldiers' National Cemetery in Gettysburg. In this brief but powerful speech, Lincoln honored the fallen soldiers and reaffirmed the principles of liberty and equality upon which the nation was founded. The speech is now considered one of the greatest in American history, encapsulating the moral and political significance of the war and the enduring ideals of the American experiment. The Battle of Gettysburg was a turning point in the American Civil War. It marked the first major defeat of General Robert E. Lee's army and halted the Confederacy's efforts to invade the North. The battle demonstrated the courage and determination of the Union Army, as well as the strategic brilliance of commanders like General George G. Meade. However, it was also a reminder of the terrible cost of war, as both sides endured immense casualties. Ultimately, the Battle of Gettysburg is remembered not just for its military significance, but for its symbolic importance in the larger struggle for the preservation of the United States and the principles of liberty and equality. It remains one of the most pivotal events in American history, and its legacy continues to inspire reflection on the nation's journey and the sacrifices made for freedom and unity. Please like and subscribe for more historical content.